Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast. We are in season 10, all about how to live a limitless life. Today, we are talking about a challenging topic for a variety of reasons for most people, and that is co-parenting and sort of how to do it, how not to do it, why does it matter, all of those fun questions that we like to ask every episode in season 10. So I'm, sort of excited about this episode. I'll be honest, I have misgivings, but it's okay. We're going to get through it. It's important. It's an important topic for us all to talk about. I want to put this out there from the get-go before I even say hello to Tova, and that is, if you are in a scenario wherein this is a part of your life where you have to co-parent and it's like great, it's terrible, it's neutral, whatever, please seek support from appropriate sources, right? Like, this is a very hard thing. I want to start this conversation with find a therapist, find a support network, a group, other parents, whatever it is, find people that will support you through it. This is not something you should try to tackle on your own. So, all of that being said, let me say hello to my incredible co-host, Tova, and welcome her to the show and see how she's feeling on this. We are still in March here, and it's raining and it's overcast, and it seems like an appropriate day to do the show.
So I have so many thoughts. I don't want to do the show.
Yeah.
I love to do our show. I don't want to do this topic. My stomach is upset, and I think it's upset because we're doing this topic. So if you're watching on YouTube and you see me eating, I'm eating Irish soda bread because A, it is March.
Yeah.
And B, my stomach is angry right now, and I might need to settle it with some bland Irish soda bread. Delightfully good. It's actually, it is the best consistency Irish soda bread I've made yet.
Oh, you made this one. Okay.
I made it. Yeah.
Nice.
I like my Irish soda bread better than other people's, but I've never really
That's fantastic.
I never really captured the consistency that I want. And what I've realized is a lot of times with when I have a consistency issue, it's that I get bored about after 30 seconds. So they'll be like, do this until this happens. And I'll be like, I've been doing it forever. And I've been doing it for like 12 seconds.
Yeah.
So what I learn is just take the bowl and take it into the living room and watch TV. So then I'm like kneading it. I'm kneading it because I'm supposed to do it until it's not sticky. And suddenly it's not sticky. And I'm like, well, that happened so fast. And it was like 6 minutes or something. I don't even know because it went by so fast. And so this like definitely was like the best consistency thus far. I was very excited about it.
Excellent.
But I am we all know that I am the divorced of the two of us. And I like talking about co-parenting normally because, well, I did the research for this one. And while most of the rating is under the assumption that it is two people that are no longer in I want to say like a romantic relationship. I'm trying to figure out how to say it because you don't necessarily need to be married previously, but like who are no longer in a
cohabitating
romantic relationship
type relationship.
Yeah. And that is the assumption, is that you are parenting but not in the same place.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the tips that they share for co-parenting, a lot of the do's with co-parenting are very helpful for people who are in fact in the same place.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because it's something I had been thinking about before we started recording, and that's that I want to touch on two other topics within this topic, and one of them is co-parenting when you're still in a relationship with the person. Like in a like we just described, like in a romantic maybe cohabitating most of the time
Right.
type relationship. And then also the difference between co-parenting and solo parenting, because I have heard those things conflated, and I think it's important that people understand the difference and appropriately apply the terms and like what do they mean.
Well, and so yeah, so there's like we're obviously going to go start talking about definitions. We're also going to spend a lot of time before we get to the how-tos and the do's and don'ts talking about the types of co-parenting
mm,
because there are different types of co-parenting. And listen, there are a lot of shoulds thrown around when it comes to co-parenting because there are plenty of studies that tell you that kids are benefited by, involvement with both of their parents, that kids are benefited by both parents getting along with each other. Kids are benefited by consistent bedtimes. Kids are benefited by consistent routines. Kids are benefited by consistent discipline. Like all of that. Kids are benefited by consistency. We know this.
yeah,
We know that kids are benefited by all of that, whether both parents are in the same home or not. Um, what we also have to recognize, though, is, and this is a disclaimer that I'm telling everyone in the audience and myself, is that the assumption is made that there are two healthy people working together that want to co-parent
right.
when these studies are written, right?
Right. And that, this, I feel like I need to highlight this again, even though we just said it. This applies whether you are divorced, separated, um, no longer together in a romantic relationship, or if you are together. Like it can be the case that you are
Right,
together in a relationship and one of you is not healthy, or both of you, frankly.
right, right. And then it also can apply to if there's a grandparent or something as the primary caregiver, like or as a primary caregiver, a
Yeah, I don't even
secondary caregiver.
Yeah, secondary, even if they just spend a lot of time, like I've
Yeah.
had, and I want to let you get to the definitions, but I've had this conversation. My parents spend a lot of time with my kids. Thank God. And thank you,
Yeah.
parents, for doing that. Um, but it's important that we're all on the same page. Like my mom will specifically ask me, what are they allowed to have? Like, what's the
Right.
rules about bedtime? What's this, that, and the other thing?
I mean, and
And that's
yeah.
that's a necessary component of my relationship with my mother and my dad, but also of my kids' relationships with them.
Well, and like for example, when my mom is watching my kids in my home, like when she's here if I'm traveling, she is more concerned about what are the rules for bedtime and consistency in my home than like if the kids spend the night at her house, because that's a special occasion, right? And
Yeah.
the kids spending the night at your parents' house is less of a special occasion
Well, yeah,
because you're
because
so
it's routine at this
it's
point.
routine.
Yeah.
But when, if my kids spend the night at my mom's house and I'm not there, it is, it's a once in a blue moon.
Right.
And so, who cares? Like, do whatever you want, like, have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
But at my house, she does try to, and they all try to keep the consistency because that's what everyone prefers and it
Right.
feels good. And my kids prefer that. Right. So I think I think that it is best to do your best with consistency. And as we talk about the types, we're going to talk about parallel parenting. And sometimes what it means as a co-parent is that you just have to be consistent in your own home. And
Right.
that's going to be what you need
Yeah.
to be the one that is reliable.
Yeah. And that
Um,
may be the best you can do. Like,
right. So let's talk about some definitions. There's a variety of definitions, and I liked some of the kind of like less definition-y and more just kind of like phrases that and sentences. Co-parent is collaboration. Um, co-parenting is a process. It is a structure which occurs involving managing the relationships with the other parent so that you can show up, be on the same team to support the child the best way you know how. I thought that was kind of interesting.
yeah.
It's a more traditional definition is it is shared parenting of children by their parents or parental figures who are non-married or living apart. They may be divorced. They may have never been married. They don't have to have any romantic involvement. It is also called joint parenting.
Yep.
And co-parenting shares not only the typical caretaking, but also might confer on major decisions about upbringing, including education, medical care, religious schooling, and other matters of importance. And I think depending on how the relationship is made depends on, the weight of how those decisions are made
Yeah.
and who is given the decisions.
Right. I just want to throw in what I said in the beginning. That is this idea of solo parenting. And you and I, Tova, have been in so many Facebook groups together now that like these are things we have like picked up along the way that really offend people. And therefore I
Right.
want to just call it out and let everyone else be aware of if you're not aware that, if you are like me and often find yourself parenting by yourself because your spouse is either working, traveling, or otherwise engaged in some sort of money making behavior, which is very often the case for me. And that does not mean I am um, parenting alone, right? Like I still have an engaged co-parent involved in my kids' lives. I am solo parenting, which means I'm just parenting by myself for that period of time. Doesn't make it any less hard. It is a very hard thing to deal
Right.
with from time to time. But it's very different than what I think we're talking about today. And I want people to be aware because, sometimes we flippantly say things and don't think anything of it. And, your intent is not to be harmful or mean or, disrespectful to somebody else's experience. But the more you know, the better you can be. So that's my second PSA of the episode, and we're not even 20 minutes in.
Yeah, I think the important thing when you're using any of those terms is different people have so drastically different experiences. And like you said, like um some people would call themselves a single parent.
That's the word. I don't know why it wasn't coming to me.
Yeah. But if they have another parent in the picture, then other people, even if they're co-parenting and they're divorced, some others wouldn't consider them a single parent
Right.
because there is another parent that they could theoretically rely on. And then, the question is, could you rely on them?
Yeah.
It kind of depends, right?
It does
Like,
depend, but like for me, one of the biggest differences is I have a partner in the process who I
yeah,
can, even if he's not here, much to his dismay, I can repeatedly text him questions and
right.
thoughts and like my stress about whatever's going on. And he, when he can, he answers. So I have that other person to share the energy of it all with, to while they may not be here physically, like to bounce ideas off of and be like, hey, should I be letting this happen, or am I being too harsh, or am I being not harsh enough, like there's
Yeah,
somebody there to have that conversation with, even if they're not physically here.
yeah, yeah. No, the decision fatigue is legit.
Oh.
And um it is interesting, and this is wildly off topic. Um, but when you don't have another adult in your house and you don't want to be going to your kids to ask them their
Yeah.
opinion on things that is not their responsibility
Right.
to have opinions on, to figure out like which friends are going to be the ones that you text and say, like, I have an assortment of friends that get like very random questions and I seek their opinion on things that I imagine other friends don't seek their opinions on because it's like they just have a spouse who they ask their opinion to.
Right.
But I'm like, I just need another adult. I just need another person to give me feedback.
Yeah.
like and then I don't even really care what your feedback is. I just need a sounding board. I just need somebody to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's a great idea.
No, that's true. That's true. It is like sometimes I feel that way even with my husband, where I'm like texting him, hey, should I like my daughter is at the age now where she wants to walk into town by herself, right? And meet her friends and whatever. And it causes me quite a bit of angst that she's
Right.
there and like that this is happening. And there's a bajillion reasons that it's stressful to me. And so sometimes I'll just text him and be like, hey, should we do this? Am I like, is this okay? And honestly, I don't really, the response is irrelevant. Like, it's just me getting the anxiety out of my body.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, you know, maybe you have a co-parent that you can have those conversations with. Who
Hmm.
knows? So there are we're going to briefly talk about why it's important to co-parent if you can. Um, and like I said earlier, um, it does benefit the kids. If successful co-parenting can hopefully lead to fewer behavior problems, kids who are closer, kids who, when the parents are co-parenting, they tend to be closer to their fathers than they would be otherwise. Um, as recently as 2022, a study cited that when the kids are co-parented, adolescents have um, lower internal distress of anxiety and depression and less aggression and delinquency. So, all those things that you would think would happen if there was more harmony or disharmony in the home is what's happening, right?
Right.
So, and that would be true if you were in a home and there was not good co-parenting among two married people as well,
Right.
right? So the goal is to try to figure out a balance. Now, when we get to the do's and don'ts, I think what's really important is this does not necessarily look like a family dinner every Sunday with everybody,
Yeah.
right? Like this means figuring out realistic expectations so that you can all like show up for your kids, right? That's why I like that definition. What does it have to look like for you to all be able to be on a soccer field together cheering on your kid?
Yeah, and
That
I like the aspect that talks about being a team, right? Like cuz
yeah.
you can be a team member with somebody you're no longer in a or never were in a romantic relationship with. You can be
Yeah.
on the same team. You don't
You can
have
be
to
a team
be.
member with somebody that you do not like.
Yeah.
You can
In
be a
fact, you
team,
probably are like in other parts of your life, right? Like
right?
you're not going to like everyone and that's pretty
And
normal.
you can be in a team member with somebody that you do not talk to, that most of your communications are via text or email,
Right.
like that you are cordial to and polite to. Um, you know, I will say, and I don't talk about my divorce and that well a lot. Um, and I would say that we are teammates who do not like each other, but we are cordial enough that we have to tell people that we are divorced
Right.
when we are at sporting events. People do not realize that we are divorced, which it probably says some sad things about marriages out there, to be perfectly honest. But
Yeah, that's fair.
but it means, but it does mean that we are cordial. We sit next, we sit near each other. Our kids are not forced to be near one or the other one. Like,
Yeah.
we are, I think as we get to the types of parenting, we parallel parent.
Right.
We are not in the perfect definition of co-parenting by any stretch of the imagination. But we are able to show up at a soccer field.
Yeah, I do want to touch on real quick, and I'm not sure if you got this later in the outline or not. And then we do need to take a quick break too. But it, healthy co-parenting is not just good for your kids, it's good for you, right? And it's good for the other person involved. And so I don't know if the research talked about that at all, but I know just based on personal experience with a variety of friends, if your co-parenting situation is not healthy for you, it has a massive impact on your life and it will very clearly negatively impact your day-to-day existence because it's just that much harder to function. It's already hard to parent, like, and so if you throw in that hurdle, it makes it even harder. So I just wanted to note that. But we should take um our first quick break. And then when we come back, Tova, you're going to talk to us a little bit about the types of co parenting. So we will
Yes.
be right back, everyone. Well, hey there, Dream Chaser. Are you ready to make the next 12 months of your life unforgettable? Introducing the Year of You, a groundbreaking new goal system group that's about to redefine the way we approach personal growth. Join us with a community of like minded individuals committed to unlocking their full potential with expert guidance, personalized strategies, kind hearted accountability, and a supportive network. The Year of You is more than just a goal setting group, it's a whole movement. Don't just dream about it, achieve it. Click in the link in our show notes or go ahead and visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/year of you to learn more today. Let's embark on a transformative journey together towards becoming the best versions we can be. The Year of You, where your goals become reality. Okay, so welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were about to talk about types of co-parenting. And Tova, I know you did the research here and you have a list of 3 different sort of categories, I guess you would call it, of co-parenting.
Yeah, so there's 3 different categories, and I feel like on any given day, maybe you fall into a different one.
Yeah.
But there's conflicted co-parenting. And so with this setup, there could be frequent conflicts, poor communication. Maybe there's difficult schedules, different parenting styles, rules, different priorities. Maybe it's difficult to reach agreements and needs and daily routines. This can be hard on kids, right? Because they can feel like they're trapped. They may feel like they're the middle person and, um, that it's almost whiplash when they go back and forth between their parents' houses.
Yeah.
And that can be avoidable if you can get on the same page, and maybe it's not avoidable if you can't get on the same page. There might be, bridges that you're not willing to cross and ways that you're not willing to compromise. But there's probably things that you can figure out, at least from a communication perspective, um, or scheduling perspective, maybe not on routines and stuff at home, but once again, you can control what you can control, right? So you
Yeah.
can control the consistency in your own home. Um, the next one is cooperative parenting. So this is when parents are working together. Obviously, this is the ideal, and this is the ideal, by the way, in when 2 parents are in the same household. So conflicting co-parenting. There's a lot of co's in this.
Yeah, that's hard to
Conflicting
say.
co-parenting can also happen when 2 parents are in the same home, right?
Absolutely.
A lot, right? And that's like, well, I don't know why mommy does it that way. We're going to do it this way.
Right.
And well, that's mommy's role. We're going to do it this way. And I mean, or that's daddy, when daddy's not here, we do it this way. And it's, that constant undermining of the other parent that can happen even if both parents are in the same home. And it may be intentional or it may not be intentional.
Yeah. I think it requires, I mean, in my experience anyway, it requires like intentional work to not have that happen, right? Like
Yeah.
and it's for us it was a trial and error process of like figuring out how to, when it's not malicious, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
If it's malicious, there's a whole other host of issues going on. But when it's just like you're accidentally stepping on each other's toes, there's a lot of work that goes into figuring that out. And it's no different if you're married, divorced, separated, whatever. I think there's a ton of work that goes into that, and both parties have to be willing to put in the work.
Well, and I think it's really important to remember that just like, when you get married and you're bringing a whole set of, well, this is how I perceive how marriage should be.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because this is how you watched your parents who were married, or maybe it's because this is how you watched, I hate to say the Huxtables because we saw how that turned out, but like before
Yep.
we saw how it turned out, and
Yeah.
that's how we
Before it
wanted.
took a sharp right turn.
Yeah. but you know, this is who we watch, the Seavers or whomever,
Yep.
and that's how we wanted it to be. And that's how you envisioned it. But then you get kids, and maybe you don't think about having the conversations about, you have conversations maybe about how, you know, timeouts or hitting and spanking, not hitting, spanking.
Yeah.
Um, but maybe you don't have conversations about like, maybe you have conversations about dinners, but you don't have conversations about what do you do when you have an 8 and a 10-year-old or a 6 and a 10-year-old, and they have taekwondo and dance and soccer and basketball and baseball, and you need to be in 87 different places at once. And what are our priorities as a family?
Right.
And you get caught up in things before you have a chance to back up. And you know, those are not necessarily conversations that you have until you're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And then you realize that, well, one spouse did things a certain way or one parent did things a certain way, and that was the expectation that, well, this is how my family did it. And then the other
Yeah.
parent said, well, this is how my family did it. And neither family did it right or wrong. It's just how your family did it. And so I think that those are conversations that can cause conflict if you're not aware to have those conversations.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and if you know, as you say, like we all bring baggage to the party, right? Like whether you like to think of yourself as somebody who has quote baggage or not, we all bring a full life experience to the conversation. And so whatever you grew up in, whatever your family system was growing up is going to influence the way you parent. It might be like I'm never going to do that. It might be this is how we did it and it was great, so I want to do it now. It could be any number of things, but you will come to the table with preconceived notions, and being willing to consider alternatives, I think, is one of the keys to having a healthy conversation about it.
yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, a healthy conversation with somebody that you were formerly in a relationship with and now you're no longer in a relationship with may look different than a
Yeah.
healthy conversation with somebody that you're currently in a relationship with. And so figuring out what that looks like, you know, we listen to, and I don't know if this is going to come out before or after we share our conversation with Chelsea, but she talked about negotiating,
Yeah.
and she talked about learning that her conversation with her husband needed to be, if it was a big conversation, it needed to be an email and then a text that said, hey, this is an email that I'm sending you, because, you know, he knew he is married to a phenomenal lawyer, and that set him on his, you know, his heels.
Yeah, it
And
may I think the implication is that it made him immediately defensive, right?
right, right. And
Excuse me.
so I think that, um, you know, you can figure out, okay, the way for us to have a conversation, whether you're married or not, or in a relationship or not, is, you know, maybe it's via email. Maybe when we were married, we used to be able to talk it out on Monday nights over a glass of wine. And now what we need to do is have it an email conversation.
Right.
And you need to figure out how to navigate that. Um, the third way is parallel co-parenting. So this kind of means that they both operate independently. There's less engagement, less cooperation, less conflict. Um, there are there's less, you know, it's good and it's bad. It's there could be similarities and routines, but there's less consistency. It's just there's not any intentionality between the two. And so there is less conflict. And this may be what you have to do if you're with a partner where there's a lot of potential, or a co-parent partner where there's a potential for a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
This may be your best option.
Yeah, and I would like to say that I don't that this none of this is coming with judgment, right? Like,
Right.
and so if you're in a scenario wherein you just cannot have a healthy conversation with the co-parent you have, it's okay. Like, and that may change over time. It may not, but it's okay to be like, you know what? I can't have this person in my life in any capacity other than what is functionally necessary.
Yeah.
And to build that boundary. I think it's okay to have that boundary. And I don't want people to hear this and be like, oh, well, if I'm not, cooperative co-parenting all the time, then I'm failing. Because that's not realistic. Even if you're still in a marriage or in a relationship, you're not going to be cooperative co-parenting all the time. Ask me how I know. Um, like I shouldn't joke. We have a very good parenting relationship, but like there are times where we don't.
Yeah.
There are days where it just doesn't go well, and that's life.
Well, and you guys are on the same team
Yeah.
and you have a lot of respect for each other, but you didn't even grow up in different states. You grew up in different countries.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
you're bringing a lot of different experiences to it, and that's not to be understated.
Yeah, and I think the key, just, should this be helpful to anyone else, I think the key for us is remembering the kinds of shared experiences we do have and where our values lie. And our values align, right? Like our values are very much aligned, and therefore it's a lot easier to make decisions that we both agree with.
Yeah.
But it requires remembering that, because sometimes you're mad and you're like, I can't believe you just did that. It's ridiculous. Um, and you have to like take a step back and think about like, wait, why are they doing this? Where is this coming from?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and that makes all the difference for me anyway. If I know, like, if I can figure out the root of what is happening, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just take one more quick break. And when we come back, we'll start with some tips to co-parenting success. So we will be right back. Hey there, pod family. Have you ever wished you could stay in the loop with a little slice of transformation and inspiration delivered straight to your inbox? Well, you're in luck because now you can. Introducing our fantastic newsletter, your VIP pass to all things exciting and informative. Join our community of growth minded souls. Get the hottest topics delivered right to your inbox. It's quick, easy, and totally free. Just head over to our website at goboldlyinitiative.com and sign up for our newsletter today. Don't miss out on the next big thing. Stay connected with us. Subscribe now and get ready for some big, bold love. Okay, welcome back. So tips to co-parenting success, the list is long. I think this works whether you are cohabitating or not. This is actually good communication for just everyone. Um, like I said, the list is long, but the number one is to practice open communication. So, and I'm going to skip ahead actually before we get to that one, because one of my favorites, and I don't know where it is on this list, but it was my favorite. And maybe it's a don't, but I'm going to make it a do. I think it's a don't that says don't have unrealistic expectations. And I'm going to move it to a do and say have realistic expectations. And that goes for no matter whether you're co-parenting and you're cohabitating or you're not. People cannot read your mind. So this goes to pretty much everything in your life, but people
Yeah.
cannot read your mind. And so if you are in a wonderful, loving, amazing relationship, the other parent can still not read your mind. Your parents can still, if they're watching your children, can still not read your mind. And so you need to tell them what your expectations are, or you need to tell them what your hopes are, or what you think. And when you are co-parenting with somebody, when you have a former romantic relationship with, and there are potentially hard feelings, which if it ended, there are potentially hard feelings, even the best
Yeah.
relationships. and the best endings. And even if you had a whatever Gwyneth had, which I can't figure out what they had some sort
Oh,
of
a conscious
lovely,
uncoupling.
a conscious uncoupling, which sounds delightful, really. Um, and I actually mean that in perfect honesty. It sounds like a
Sure.
lovely way to end a marriage. Um, there were big emotions that caused you to couple. Like,
And probably to uncouple, right? Like there's
yeah.
a lot of feeling involved in
So, right. So
relationships.
be realistic about your expectations as to what co-parenting will look like.
Yeah.
And I will use my parents as an example, even though my mom listens to this. So hi, mom. Um, my parents have been divorced. I don't know when they actually got officially divorced, but they've been separated since I think I was like 2 or 3 years old. And so that's almost 40 years at this point. And we spent, and I would say that they, after the first couple years, which were definitely bumpy, I remember yelling on the phone and stuff like that. Um, I would say after the first, couple years, they at least on the outside did parallel parenting at the very minimum and put on a very good show. Um, and they could go to, I never worried about fights at like a high school graduation. Like it was not conflict co-parenting,
Yeah.
right? And so, high school graduations, college graduations, showers, things like that. And I don't know if at any point I worried about them fighting, but like soccer games, things like that. At the very minimum, there was parallel parenting. The households certainly weren't the same. They were very different, but um, parallel parenting was in place. And they were able to kind of lock in on that. But once again, the households were very different. There was definitely fighting at the beginning. There were emotions that it happens. Um, and now, 40 years later, it probably took until I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, at time, who knows?
Mm,
Before I spent my first Thanksgiving with all my parents, right? Because we all got together for Thanksgiving. And now my kids, they assume that all the grandparents are going to be at all their birthday parties. They assume we celebrate Easter with all the grandparents. They just, they expect everybody to be everywhere. And their grandparents come as a package of four. Like they recognize there are two couples there, but and so they have evolved. But there's still, feelings. Like they're still two of those people were married at some point.
right.
And so I think and they were married like 45 years ago. Um, I think that it is unrealistic to expect that emotions to ever disappear. And so I think that the whole thing about this whole co-parenting thing is if you had romantic feelings for somebody that caused you to get into a romantic relationship with somebody and create a child, um, those romantic feelings are going to turn into something. And it's going to take a really long time to navigate a way for it to be chill. And so you just need to figure out what kind of boundaries you need to set to make it realistic and pleasant. And what does open
Yeah.
communication look like? And open communication might look like not talking on the phone. It might look like emailing and
Right.
texting. And so it might look like, handing off in a way that isn't chatting by each other's cars. It might be as many pickup and drop offs where I drop off in the morning at school and you pick up at school and we
Right.
don't have to see each other. So, I think it's just being realistic because this goes back to boundaries and like fences making good neighbors.
Yes. I want to talk about one of the tips on here that I think goes right along with what you're talking about. And the idea, what it says in the outline, which you took from research, is to let go of the past. Now, I think that goes right along with realistic expectations, because you cannot expect yourself to immediately be over whatever it is that happened, right? Like whatever caused the relationship to dissolve is not something that you're going to be able to let go of with the snap of your fingers and be done with. Excuse me. But that being said, like when I think about, I don't have the example of a previous spouse or partner, but I do have the example of my parents, right? And I have a whole life I lived with them before I had kids, before I was married, all of those things. And so sometimes what I have to ask myself when I find that they've done something and I'm frustrated, or they've done something, with my kids and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why is this happening? Um, I have to ask myself, is it about now or is it about before? Right. So, does it even have anything to do with my kids and what they're doing with my kids? Or does it have to do with how I feel about something that happened between myself and my parents? And
Mm.
I think I think when I learned that about myself and I learned to do that, it made the relationship much easier, like the co-parenting like because they really do spend a ton of my time with my kids, so I feel like they are somewhat co-parents. um it made that relationship so much easier because I could look at it and go, no, this actually is an issue, and like this is a boundary that I've set and they've crossed, or it isn't, and it's just something that like I need to work out between me and them, and it has nothing to do with what they're doing with my kids. So I think the same applies to your relationships with your exes, your partners, whatever, whoever you're co parenting with. If you can ask yourself the question, am I mad or am I upset or am I frustrated? Am I feeling an emotion about this thing because it's relative to the parenting? Or is it I'm mad and upset because it's relative to what happened between me and the person? I mean, it
Mm.
could be both, frankly, but it might not be. And if it's not, then that's the kind of thing we want to let go of as much as we can, because, that's stuff you're going to want to work through in therapy or work through with a support group of some sort, not work through in your co parenting experience, two separate spaces.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, there was a lot of advice to work with a therapist in a lot of the reading I did, and I didn't include it in the outline because I assumed it was going to just come up
Yeah.
naturally. And I didn't need to include it.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and there was also a lot of advice like if you feel like your kids need the help, go to a therapist for your kids, get your kids therapy. Like some of it is, tools. Maybe your kids just need tools that they can then use to help navigate um, what it is that they're going through. And I would say, so here are some other things like do's of figuring out how to share the necessary information. Um, I would say talk with your kids and let them know what's going to be happening, but talk to your kids in an age appropriate way. And just give them appropriate information. Kids should never be messengers between parents. That's why we're talking about communication with the other parent. You figure out how to do that. So, like, they don't need to know things before the other parent knows them.
Yeah. But
Give
you
them
can,
each,
oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry. You can also, I'm thinking about logistics, and like you can also engage somebody to help. If you have the disposable income to do it, you can find somebody to help with the logistics of everything, of like
Hmm.
creating a schedule, of figuring out how information is going to flow between households, that kind of stuff, while on at the face feels like, oh, that should be easy. I can do that. No problem. It can become fraught with emotional stuff. I mean, because you're going through an emotional time period,
Yeah.
and that can last from a year to 10 years to 20 years. I don't know. It can last forever. So getting an objective third party involved who could create the schedule for you or determine how the logistics will work. Now, all of that, of course, is assuming that the other person is willing to participate and that you have the money to spend on something like that. And those are, two big what ifs factors that
Well,
I
and
recognize.
this is where you had said something at the beginning, and so I do want to go back to this. Making sure that you have support, whether it's
Yeah.
from family or friends, because And you also said just a few minutes ago about making sure that your reactions are reacting to what is happening now versus something that happened in the past.
Yeah.
And so I know I have texted you, not in relation to co-parenting actually, but said, am I being too sensitive? And you said, well, I don't like saying too sensitive, which I appreciate. But, it is helpful to have a friend or friends that you can text something to and say, this is my reaction. Am I reading something into this?
Yeah.
Or is there something here? And for me, sometimes that is that I have missed red flags in the past. And so it's like, am I looking for red flags where there aren't any? Right? Like, am I looking for zebras where it's just horses? Or also, am I missing even the horses? Like I don't sometimes I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's helpful to have some friends where you can text to and say, get a load of this. Like, am I taking away from this what I should be taking away from this? Because I think that can be incredibly helpful as a gut check
Yeah.
and just making sure that you're like, not bringing in too much from the past, but then
Yeah.
also not missing if it is a contentious situation, that you're not missing something.
Well, right. And it is never the case that you should forget that the past exists, right?
Yeah.
Like the past informs us with helpful information.
Yeah.
It's just what we're trying to say, and just I feel like I need to clarify this, though I probably don't, is not to ignore red flags. Or if you have a partner or an ex-spouse or whatever who throws up red flags all the time, like don't forget that stuff. it's
Right.
it's important. It's important for your safety, it's important for your emotional well-being, it's important for your kids, all those things. So you don't want to forget those, but you do want to have the ability to be objective enough to notice the difference between what has happened in the past, what is happening right now, and what might happen in the future. They're three distinct things, and it can be very hard to navigate through in any aspect of our lives, frankly. Like it's not just in co-parenting. Like that's hard in life to figure those things out, to not bring your, trust issues from a different relationship into a new relationship. We all know that. It's super hard. And again, shout out to therapy. It's a really, really good place to work through that stuff and like figure out what you should be paying attention to and what you can let go of. Um, we love
Yeah.
therapy.
100%. And one more thing just about support. Recently, I was sharing with a friend, and I would consider her to be a good friend, although not someone I've spent a lot of time with. And she's super busy right now. And I was sharing some stuff that I'm going through. And she asked me, she goes, do you have support? And that's not a question I've gotten a lot. And I appreciated that question so much
Yeah.
because I don't know that she could actually offer support right now just because she is incredibly busy. And so she wasn't offering support and she wasn't offering false support that she really can't give.
Right.
She was setting, but the fact that she asked, and I was able to say, yes, I do have support. Um, but the fact that she even asked, it's now a question I'm adding to my arsenal of questions to be able to ask somebody.
Yeah. I don't think anyone has ever in my lifetime asked me that. Like
It
ever.
was it was such it was such a special question that she
Yeah.
asked me.
This
I
is a how is your
appreciate it.
heart moment.
It was. And I appreciated it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that if I said not really, she might not be the support, but she would have figured out how to get me the support.
Yeah.
She would have been able to tag people in. But I just thought that that was such an important question. And I think that is something that we can offer our friends. It's sometimes we aren't the support that they need. And sometimes we aren't the support, like we can't be the support for whatever reason.
Yeah. You may not have the emotional bandwidth or time, actual time or
Yeah.
whatever.
And that's okay. But
Yeah.
I think that, you know, um, so often when somebody's going through something, we go, what do you need? And that
Yeah.
is such an overwhelming question.
It's the worst question.
It is the worst question. I'm like, everything, a nap, a
Nothing. I
vacation,
don't know.
$10,000. I don't know. Um, but like, uh, when she said, do you have support? Like, to me, that was just like, oh, okay, yes, actually, I do.
Right. It's a
And
question you can actually answer too, which,
yes,
personally, I always appreciate when it's a
yes,
question I have an answer
exactly.
to.
And so I know I'm taking us a little, but you had mentioned at the very beginning something about support, and I've been
Yeah.
meaning to say it the whole time. And so, I do think, and I want to highlight that we have talked a lot, and maybe it's just because of the season of my life, we've talked a lot about this, that co-parenting can be contentious. It doesn't have to be,
No.
right? Like, um, you know, you can show up and support each other if possible. And I think the biggest thing is just figuring out what that looks like, because if for everybody it's going to look different.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
to know that there's not a right or wrong way to do, well, there can be a wrong way. But if you're showing up for each other with the best interest of the kids at heart, I don't think there's a wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a wrong way to be a positive influence in someone's life, right? Like
Yes.
if you're coming to the table with good intentions, even in the midst of whatever negative feelings you might be having, right? Like if you can put those aside for the purpose of recognizing that you, whether you created a life with somebody or you certainly raised a human with another person, right? Like that in and of itself can create enough space for people to put aside the negative aspects of whatever is happening and focus on that shared positive connection. Not always, and we haven't even dipped our toes into the whole host of things that might be happening with your co-parent that make that completely impossible. And
Right.
that's not your fault if that's your situation. It is. It's just an existence. Um, but beyond all of that, like being able to talk to the other person about the shared positive experience and like focus solely on that aspect, I think, is where people find themselves. I don't want to use the word succeeding because that's a terrible judgmental sounding word, but having success with their co-parenting journeys.
Yeah. Yeah. So, before we wrap up, just some quick don'ts, which I hate to end on a down note, but I feel like,
I
I
feel like it's
mean,
all right in this scenario.
yeah. So, um, don't talk negatively about your co-parent to your kids. Don't ask your kids to take sides. Don't keep your kids from the co-parent out of spite. Don't ask your kids to spy on the co-parent. And by the way, this like works once again, whether you're cohabitating or not cohabitating with your parent.
It sure does.
Um, don't be inconsistent with an agreed upon parenting plan. Don't let promises fall through. Don't expect your relationship with your co-parent to be conflict free, whether you're married or not.
Mhm.
Don't berate your co-parent or yourself for human mistakes. That could be a bumper sticker. Don't berate
Yeah.
yourself for human mistakes. Don't overshare with your child. Practice boundaries with your co-parent, or don't allow porous boundaries with your co-parent, which you all know what that is because we just talked about porous boundaries not that
Yep.
long ago. And do not hesitate to see a therapist if feelings about or problems with your co-parent overwhelm your best efforts.
Yeah.
So that actually feels like ending on a high note.
Well, I do want to just, before we completely wrap up, I do want to say we've talked about boundaries so much on this show. And this is an area of life where if you do not know how to set boundaries, you are really going to struggle, right? Like
Yeah,
this is an area where you have to figure out what your boundaries are and set them and stick to them. And so if that's not a skill set you have gained yet in your life, I really, really encourage you to work on it, whether you work on it with a life coach, a therapist, some sort of support group, your friends and family, whoever. Please focus on setting and maintaining the boundaries that work for you, whether they're energetic or physical boundaries. It's so important to take care of yourself as best you possibly can. And this is one of the ways we can take care of ourselves.
definitely. So some homework. It's a little weird because everybody's kind of at a different spot. So it's a kind of a strange homework. Um, I don't know if you have an idea. I have some
So
ideas.
I mean, my idea for homework on this is really to think about whether you are co-parenting in a current relationship, like a current active romantic relationship, whether you're co-parenting with grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever, like whatever family member is involved in this co-parenting experience, or even if you are divorced or you're separated or you're no longer in a relationship with the other parent of your child, whatever all of that looks like in your life, stop for a second and think about, what is this parenting relationship like? Is it working for me? Is it working for my kids? And get out a journal and just start brainstorming, right? Like, does this relationship work? Does this relationship with my kids work? What does it look like? And then I would suggest you write down like the top three things you would change and the top three things you would keep together. And or keep the same. Sorry, my brain stopped working. And then look at those and see what it is you can do to achieve those three things, right? Like if there's three things that are working, great. How are you going to maintain those? If there's three things that aren't working, what can you do to make those three things a little bit better for you and for your kids? And that's my homework.
Sounds great for me.
Um,
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, the other homework I would give you guys is what we always say, and that is, if you are in need of support, if you are looking for a place to connect with like-minded women, join our weekly women's circle. It is a great place to talk about your struggles, to share your successes, to learn a little bit more in depth about the stuff we talk about on the show, and make some really cool friends, meet some really interesting, fantastic women. So you can find the link to join us in our on our website or in our bio for our Instagram and Facebook and everywhere. So you can find us at Go Boldly Together anytime. We would love to have you. We would love to hear from you. And I think that's it for this week. We will be back next week with another how-to. Season 10 is going to be a long one. So stay tuned with us because we're how-toing all the way through. If there's something you want to learn, if there's a how-to in your life that you're missing, also send us a message and let us know. Maybe we will cover it in the show. You never, ever know. But that's it for this week. And everyone have a wonderful week. We will see you back here next week with more how-tos. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.